Hey everybody, how's it going? My name is Kyle LaFont, and we're here streaming with Fantasy Forge Studios, the very beginning of Everlast, a new tabletop RPG that is in its final process of being made, and here we go. So let's go ahead and introduce everybody first as far as our players are concerned. First and foremost, my name is Kyle LaFont. I am the creator and founder of Everlast, the tabletop RPG. And we've been playing this game as a group for, like a year and a half or something. And recently we took a pretty big hiatus as I was continuing to finish some of the mechanics of the game. We actually first started off Everlast as a D&D campaign for my bachelor's party way back in the day, and it's evolved to the point where it is today. And and so like I've been going through and creating this game for years. It's been a total of about 6 to 7 years in the making lore, of really narrowing things down as far as it's concerned for creating the game. And so, yeah, it's a completely new world that we're going to dive into. So it's going to be awesome. But yeah, so I'm Kyle LaFont, and we're going to go ahead and starting below me with Zill. Max, go ahead and introduce yourself as a person.
Hello, my name is Max Eekler. I'm playing the character of Zill, and I actually jumped into this campaign a little bit later, just kind of on a whim. They told me they were doing it. I'm like, that sounds so fun. I would love to join. And I've known Kyle, Dane, and their brother Cole for 22 years now, I think. So it's just been fun to get to know these guys a lot, grow up with them, and now do whatever this crazy adventure is going to be together. I'm looking forward to it. I love games way too much, so this is a very exciting adventure for me.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Cole.
Hi everyone, I am Cole LaFont, the youngest of the LaFont brothers. I will be playing Luksalia of Silverwood. I won't be talking in this macho masculine voice. I'll be talking in my falsetto voice. Super excited to play. I don't know, do you need to know more about Luksalia, or is it just getting to know like me?
Just getting to know you as a person.
There it is. All right.
That's
me. I was an actor for a bit, and then now I'm playing this with my bros. So sweet.
Awesome.
That's all I got to say.
And off to the person that everyone knows.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing absolutely wonderful today. And thank you for making it to our wonderful broadcast and our inaugural episode, Session 0 of Everlast. Those of you who don't know me, I'd be surprised since this is technically my Twitch channel. I am Dane, or as you better know me as Fantasy Forged, and I am voicing the character of Yuki Mistletoe, and she's awesome. I'll talk about her a little bit later. But yeah, I've been working with Kyle on this project for a while now. A lot of the guys at the table are longtime friends of mine, and I have known even some of them since I was a wee little lad. And it's been a really great experience, and I am really excited to share this adventure with each and every one of you. So thank you, everyone.
Connor.
Yes, hi guys. I'm Connor Aaron, and I will be playing Belvin Roku, who is quite the character. You guys will see. But yes, I got roped in about 2 years ago with the bachelor party, and it's just kind of been a staple ever since, all through the pandemic. We'd all come together to do this. But yeah, I don't know, super excited. It's been a while, so it might take a little bit to get back into it, but we'll see.
All right, thanks, Connor. And John.
I am John. Yep, I am John. I've known the LaFonts and the Beeklers for a very long time, since I was a little kid. And so I've been friends with these guys for a while, and really excited to be a part of this. Never streamed anything before, and this will be an interesting experience, and I hope that you guys can all be patient with me as I try to figure out how to do this. So
we're all figuring it out together.
I'll be playing Thordane. I'm sure we'll get into more of the character stuff later, but that's me.
Well, these are all of our players for now. And honestly, I am so looking forward to finally being back playing this. We actually stopped mid-August, and so it's been months since we've gotten together to play. And so off we go. First and foremost, introducing this world that I have been in the process of creating, the world of Everlast. Everlast first originated as an idea when I was in college, and it began as I was actually going over Tolkien texts. Went into the texts of J.R.R. Tolkien, and one thing that I've always loved about him is I've fallen in love with his classic Christian world of Middle-earth. Absolutely incredible, amazing, and since then, as I was working out in the gym up at University of Colorado, I started really developing ideas for a world similar to Tolkien's in that Christian aspect, but something where I could not necessarily just write it on paper, but bring it to life through game. I've always been in love with games and all that kind of stuff, and so yeah, it's been a process, and finally here we are, and I'm so glad to share it with you all. So kind of starting with some lore. We start way back in the first age of Everlast. And life was breathed into the world by the creator Ailments. The High King above all sat sitting on his throne in Landisfrain. Landisfrain is a mountaintop city, which if you guys see, you have a little map here in Everlast. It's in the far right corner. Everlast itself is a continent filled with many continents around it, but it's the central continent in the world as a whole, Everlast. And this was the very first area where Ailments breathed life into the world. Below him were certain creatures called Serac. He created them. They're immortal beings where you have Ailments, who is immortal as well, but he is also everlasting. He is a being that has always existed from the beginning of time. He decided to create this world of Everlast to bring life. The Serac, each one of them were to assist him in this task, each of them with different gifts. Essentially what ends up happening is he begins to form the world and create the world, and the first humans were created in the continent. And over time, they began to disperse over the continent and the neighboring continents as well. As soon as this happened, naturally speaking, one of the Serac began to grow envious, particularly of the creative powers of Alamnia. He created these beings, these humans, these mortals, in his own flesh and image. And Malvish, who is one of them, Serac, looked at him with scorn, thinking of them as so weak, so pitiful. Eventually, he began to grow more and more in distress, wanting that power, envious of the power that Alamnia had. And after many attempts of trying to create life, he created ugly, evil, disgusting creatures on the earth. Nothing that really had a free will of their own, but were evil indeed. So he, breaking the rules that Alamnia had set for the Serac, descended into the world of Everlast in search of a way to destroy the human race, as it were. He went to the 4 dragons of Everlast. There were 4 great beasts that were created as the beasts themselves were. And he went disguised as each of these beasts to local communities, asking them to pledge allegiance to him in disguise as these dragons. And thus, the very first peoples of Everlast began to pay homage to these dragons, turning their view towards these great, magnificent creatures as opposed to Alamnia. The human race began to divide itself for those who began to worship the dragons and for those who stayed faithful to Alamnia. Eventually, war broke out between the two people. Alamnia basically charged these new people, these people that he had, under the tutelage of the other remaining Serac. He gave each and every single one of those humans gifts, being champions from their patron Serac. And through that, they began to fight a bloody and very brutal war against the other humans. When all came to an end at the end of the First Age, the warriors of Alamnia ended up prevailing. The dragons were all banished to their respective areas, respective realms. And those who followed the dragons were bestowed with a curse, the curse of Draken. These people were given likeness of dragons, especially horns. Males have tails, females have wings, and scales up and down their necks and along their backs. These are supposed to be signs of idolatry, and it was a curse to be bestowed on them that would last many, many generations to come. On the other hand, you have those who fought the war against the Drakens that ended up prevailing. Because of that, Alamnia granted them with extended life, thus creating the Elven race. They began to stop seeing the passage of time quite as much. Unlike Tolkien's world where elves are immortal, elves in Everlast can live up to 750-ish years before succumbing to old age, which their skin never tells. They are cursed with or blessed with eternal youth to a degree before departing back to the gates of Landisfried. The remaining humans of the world in the other continents remained humans. They stayed outside of the conflict, but they also didn't rise to fight for the armies of Alamnia too. So humans stayed there as well. In the far southern regions of Nerun, one of the dragons lay dormant, and there was a group of humans who began to worship them, and that dragon itself was not involved in the war, was not involved in the conflict. And though they weren't involved in the conflict, there was a curse set upon them as well, where these race of humans were put to sleep for generations and generations to come, until the dawning of the Fourth Age, when awakened in the forest, these bestial humans arose in the land of Nerun, where we first see the first signs of the Glyven race. Half humans, half fox-like creatures. And then off to the far east, you have the enormous continent of Mysteria. In that continent, you had the Fey creatures. The Fey creatures are fairy-like individuals that were first started as in the initial remnants of Malvish's attempt at creation, and they began to go deep into magical powers. And once a group of individuals over there were put to sleep by an archfey, and they got lost in the dream world or the fairy world. And being lost in that world, it actually ended up corrupting them, turning them into a race of fairies, which when they were finally able to break free from the dream world, they were able to come into likeness in the world that we know, in Mysteria. And so the fairy race was born. Few millennia after the First Age, you had various Watchers. So after the First Age, Alamnia had sent out angelic beings into the world of Everlast to watch from the shadows. Until eventually one day, one grew envious and grew lustful of the elves and the people that still inhabited Everlast. And taking the form, a physical form, through putting their spirit into soul gems, into gems in the earth, they were able to create bodies of flesh around them. And thus the race of Hiroxin were created, reproducing with elven women, and these rock-like entities continue to live today. The original Watchers were punished, sent to the Realm of the Void, which at the end of the First War, Malvish was sentenced to. A place of nothingness, a place of despair. And finally, we have, all the way through generations of conflict, the dawning of the Sixth Age. And the Sixth Age is where our story currently takes place. 600 years later, 656 to be exact, a group of heroes awokened deep in the pits of the Subterran, a deep, dark world ruled by evil elves, corrupted elves. They awokened in the characters of Luksalia, Yuki, and Belbin. They had led lives beforehand until they were trapped by ghoulish creatures, brought to the evil archdemon, or not the evil archdemon, but the evil dark elf Nymphixa. And they were supposed to be sent to Fexer Doom until the three of those characters, along with a group of other brave individuals, broke free, making their way through the Everlast Subterran all the way up until they ended up meeting a mysterious elf by the name of Thordane, who joined the group in attempts to help them flee. They eventually were able to break out of the Subterran and make their way over to the Great Peninsula, which, if you guys look at this map, is this giant continent body here, where humans today predominantly reside. The group of Luksalia, Yuki, and Belbin, along with a bunch of other misfits, are trying to make their way out of the Subterran, escaping the clutches of Nymphixa, to try to get back to the surface, seemingly to return to the lives that they previously had. They ended up meeting a dark elf, not a dark elf, a wood elf, Thordane, who attempted to help them get out of the Subterran. As they did so, they eventually did make their way out after dealing with some very interesting folk and some incredible threats, which I will not diverge now, or I'll let you guys know now. And they eventually made their way over to the Great Peninsula, largely inhabited by humans. They made their way to the city of Helix, to where they gave a potion to King Alexander III, curing him of his illness. However, during their journeys in the great city of Helix, a great threat from the void was unleashed on the city. A Jabberwocky, an ancient beast that has been long extinct from the continent to the east of Mysteria, that now had been remanifested in the city of Helix. To which everybody in the city took up arms to fight this destructive foe, including our group of adventurers. And in addition to that, a new character to the group, Zill, a human from Helix, where they ended up felling the Jabberwocky. They were given their task in Kamela's abode, a tavern within the city, in order to quell the archdemons that have begun to show themselves throughout the land of Everlast. And that, from then on, the group was created, Eclaas Eeas, or in Alamnic tongue, the Senders, sent by the mage Jek into the world to dispel the world of the evils of the void, as Malvish is attempting to reclaim the land that and the people that were so close and so dear to the King Alamnia. So they made their way through there, and by various circumstances, they are now on vacation in a remote set of islands down to the south of the Aishan archipelago. And so that's about as caught up as we need to be at this current point in the adventure. Lots of things have happened in between, which will get brought up, I'm sure, by players as they recall instances and whatnot. Yeah, it's gonna be really great. So as we do that, let's go ahead and introduce each of our characters. Let's go ahead and start.
So my name is Thordane. I'm typically a very private person, and I don't like to share much about myself. But I suppose if I'm going to be adventuring with these people for the foreseeable future, they deserve. My ancestry is complicated, too much to get into here. I struggle with part of my past, the part that is connected to the ancestors I try to separate myself from. All you need to know is that I can shoot a bow better than most, track beasts efficiently, and seek to find my place among a group that I can trust. And I'm starting to believe that this group might be that place I've been missing.
Great. So that is Thordane. He is our elf partner. As mentioned, he does wield a bow, and he plays a ranged attacking / support role in the party as well. You're gonna go ahead. We're gonna definitely see lots of help from him going forward.
He is a young orphan from Helix, and when the Jabberwocky showed up to attack his home, he jumped into the fight. He is our Great Axe, or Battle Axe, I think it's now called, wielding tank, so he takes a lot of hits. Always ready for a fight, always ready to hit things with his axe. He loves using an axe. And when he's not, hacking and slashing in Helix to kind of help provide for some of the orphans that he had taken under his. So when he's not, hacking and slashing like I already said, he is working on crafting and has a goal to hopefully one day be one of the most well-known blacksmiths in the land. We'll see how well that goes, and if he can do that while also trying to save the world. It's hard to balance both, but that's Zill.
Great. All right, Yuki, while everyone's figuring things out.
Yeah. Well, no problem. Female silver Draken, Tane Yuki. So she comes from a long line. I consider her to be of the bardic perclusion, I guess. She's really, really cool. She's really nice. Yuki's awesome. She's people so much, but she did have a companion back in the day by the name of Fife. He was a Vale Dune elf who really showed her the ropes on how to actually trust people. And I guess that for her, she really struggled with. And through the adventures with Eclaas Eeas, she is definitely kind of taken on the role as a motherly figure. So not only is she pretty charismatic, Eclaas Eeas and her party mates are incredibly, they're incredibly important to her, and she loves them to death, and so she's going to do everything she can to protect them. So that's all right.
Okay, Belbin, I think your mic's working, so let's go ahead and pull you up.
Perfect.
I think I'm back. Yes, Belvin is not only the oldest of the group, he is significantly older than I think everyone else, but he's also the wisest, smartest, most athletic, and best looking. Just kidding. Some would probably describe him as selfish, proud, and delusional would probably be more accurate. But if there's one thing that I think everyone would agree on is that Belvin loves a good fight. He never shies away from it. Even if he's bound to lose, I think that he'll just still go headstrong right into it. He doesn't really care who he fights. He picks a fight at a bar or an actual enemy he'll fight. But big guys, small, they're all fair game for him. So very just hungry for a good fight, I would say, is one of the defining characteristics of Belbin. But growing up, he's a Glyven, so he's the half fox, half human, a little bit of an outcast. Struggles to kind of connect with people, but is always kind of there. Sometimes he'll try to pick up women at bars, stuff like that, but it doesn't really go well because his clothing that he wears is mostly rags or things with rips. Well dressed, I guess, guy. But yeah, he'll be a character. He likes wreaking havoc and then walking away as there's an explosion in the background. So better keep an eye on him because he can be tricky sometimes.
Thank you, sir. So that is Belbin. All right, let's see if we can get Luksalia going.
Hi, I'm Luksalia. I'm the Silverwood, from Silverwood. That's where I'm from. Yeah, I grew up. It was pretty good living in the Silverwood. Didn't grow up with much, but life was good. And then I joined the shrine of Amaterasu and have a great devotion to her because she's the best. And I learned all about Alamia, except we call him Koto Matsukami, but that's beside the point. And I just basically was initiated, but then I was taken, and I'm the party healer, and it's super fun, and I don't have to. And I apparently am really bad at audio, so there's that. Yeah, and I'm a Glyven if I didn't say it already. That's Luksalia.
All right, thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Luksalia.
So that is our party of Eclaas Eeas. Currently, as things stand, we have the way that Everlast works mechanically is it's a tabletop RPG that kind of sort of functions like your typical like RPG online. Like think of I don't know, Final Fantasy 14. Think of things like I don't know, things like that. And so like there's different roles that the different characters play. And so we have supporters, we have attackers, and we have defenders. Each have their own niches in combat. Particularly, this group is split up between 2 support, 2 attackers, and 1 defender. Our supporters are going to be primarily Luksalia and Thordane. Our attackers are going to be Yuki and Belbin, and our defender is the axe-wielding Zil. And so the way that each character, the way that they're split down, is based on a path and based on a patronage. So as mentioned earlier in kind of the story of Everlast, like at the very beginning, the Serac, these kind of divine creatures that were made by Alamnia, we're each gifted with a special ability, which are going to be, they pass down through chosen champions throughout time. Different Serac can have multiple champions at one time. It's not like there's like, oh, this one specific individual is my champion for everything. They can have a number of champions. And so the world throughout, as Everlast has gained conflict, lost conflict, there's been divine intervention by the Serac, calling to arms specific champions. And so the way that each living being is created, they're all created with the potential to be called to one of these champion roles. And so starting at level 1, the way that the level progression goes, it goes from level 1 all the way to level 10. Starting at level 1, you are called as you are called by the Serac, a specific Serac, to be a champion. And you begin as you level up, gaining things such as traits, arts, which are mana abilities, and mana is the life energy that breathes through Everlast. It comes from the throne of Landisfrane, and it works through a good way for those who know about Christian theology. The Holy Spirit. It's a good way to be able to work. It's Alamnia's way that he interacts with the world through mana. And so these champions are able to harness mana and use them as attacks, as support actions, as all kinds of things to be able to aid them in combat. Where you would have like a typical like human guard who lives like a relatively average lifespan of about 85 years. Probably the best that they're ever going to be is about like 1/4 of a level. They don't have much time in the world to be able to grow much as far as prowess, as far as their combat skills. And maybe some of the best could go to like 1/2 of a level. But then you have elves, on the other hand, who live for hundreds and hundreds of years. So you might have your typical elf warrior who has the ability to maybe get up to like level 3, like a level 3 level. But that's about what they can get to in their super long lives. And so essentially the Serac, they gift these specific individuals, these mortal beings, with the ability to grow beyond the natural means of how you're supposed to be. And so throughout the land of Everlast and the neighboring continents, you have these characters called adventurers. They're people who take up the sword to be able to go out and fight back the evils of the world, whether they're the roaming beasts in the world or in darkened days, the denizens of the void. Evil demonic creatures that are released every now and then as void rifts open between the unstable connection between the world of Everlast and the realm of the void. And so they're out to basically keep the world safe, to keep the world at peace. And that's as characters begin to progress and they become heroes. Once players reach level 5, they become what are known as heroes. And so they gain a path. And at that point, they diverge from just their patronage themselves, but then they get to choose between 4 different paths within that patronage. So for example, you have, let's just use Yuki as an example. She is a bard. So she has a, she is the patron, her patron is Malelinque, who is a bard with bardic skills and bardic abilities that are passed down to Yuki. And once she hit level 5, she was able to choose from 4 distinct different paths, which were the attacker. There's 2 attackers. So there's physical attackers, which she chose as a blade dancer. So she basically uses swords and whatnot to be able to inflict physical types of damage, which are cutting and impact damage on creatures. And then she could have picked another role, such as Storyteller. The Storyteller is a elemental DPS class, an elemental attacking class that allows them to cast elemental damage on people. So the elemental damage types in this game are light, dark, flame, electric, earth, and frost. And so with the ability of elemental weapons, they're able to cast spells not spells per se, but arts through mana, through different types of weapons against different creatures. And then you have your defender classes. You have your tank type classes, which where they excel at is either high HP, high defenses, or the ability to garner attention from enemies to themselves, to protect they're damage sponges. They're supposed to take damage and keep the rest of their party safe. And then finally, you have the supporter classes, which essentially what those do, or the supporter paths, which what those do is they're supposed to aid in various ways. They can give status buffs. They can provide people with changing initiative. They are there for healing, so they can use mana to heal party members and whatnot. And then even through the basically players can use items as well to heal, to do all kinds of things. And you'll see as we continue through the process of Everlast how that kind of functions. The party as we are, because we have moved primarily from a D&D focus to Everlast, we're all going to be learning together. And so even the first few combats, like it's probably going to take us a little bit to get... It'll take us a bit to get used to, especially the combat systems and how things are supposed to work like that. So bear with us as we all learn together. It's going to be great, kind of seeing how this is going to be going forward. So yeah, it's pretty exciting. And like it has like its differences from like your traditional tabletop RPGs as well. So let's go ahead and dive into what this first stream is going to be, is kind of describing the game as a whole. But before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and throw up this disclaimer. So because this game itself is still in the early processes of being made, we actually chose to stream it to you so you guys could be the very first to experience this whole process with us. Not only creating hopefully some fun fantasy content for Fantasy Forge Studios, but for this game itself to be able to get exposure on the level as a whole. And so this game is primarily owned by me and Fantasy Forge Studios. And so we're going to go ahead and throw up this copyright disclaimer. Don't take our stuff. So this includes things such as images, video, audio, graphics, story, gameplay mechanics, and all of the intellectual property such as story and like that kind of stuff that we have created. We've protected it all. We're protecting it all. So don't use it. This is, like I said, been a baby of mine for the past 7 years. So please, please, please use this, enjoy it. You guys can use it for your own stuff. If you do like you might want to start your own D&D campaign, but nothing for commercial use or whatnot. Just please really respect the time that it took for me to bring this game out and whatnot. So hopefully this should be fun for all of you. So thank you guys for bearing with that. And on another note, another reason why we decided to start streaming this as well is to help fund the game, at least begin funding for the game. Art is very expensive. These beautiful art pieces that we have, we support creators of art. They're very expensive. And being able to create lots of gorgeous art for the game itself, for source material, for source books, all that kind of stuff, it does cost money. You guys can help support. Eventually a Patreon is going to go up where you're going to be able to, depending on the level that you subscribe on Patreon, during our streams you are going to be able to give hope boons to people, which what those do is it basically works like Advantage in D&D, where basically they can re-roll. So if a certain circumstance comes up where there's a very important roll that has to be made, the chat themselves can give hope. Unfortunately, players, if you do subscribe to that Patreon, you cannot give hope to yourself. Sorry. But you can get a certain amount of hopes per month that you can give to be able to help modify rolls. So my job as the Fate Weaver, essentially determining the fates of the party as a whole, you guys can change that fate by giving them hope rolls. So that's one way to do it. And another way we're doing it is we are selling Everlast merch. If you go to the Fantasy Forge page, there is a link to the merchandise shop. So we have all kinds of fun things for Everlast that we have out there. We have really cute chibi arts of things that you can purchase to be able to follow along with what we have going on. But yeah, we'll continue to update the store as more comes. Do you have anything to add to that, Dane?
Do I have anything more to add? You can find the merch store under the About section. And thank you, everyone. I really appreciate each and every one of you for the gifting subs, that kind of stuff. Again, we're not necessarily going to be able to respond to raids. We're not going to be able to respond to new subscribers. But feel free to stop by any of our normal streams that I do stream throughout the week, and I can make sure to thank you appropriately for such things. But as far as merch goes, yes, again, things are expensive, but this is my little gift to you. These wonderful, adorable, cute little arts. So one thing that's awesome about Everlast as a game is it's not just straight westernized tabletop RPG D&D. It has a huge Japanese influence, and so a lot of the actual official art, a lot of the characters, actually all of the characters, have their own anime kind of look on them. So with that, one popular art style is chibi art. So chibi is a smaller, cuter version of each of the characters. So you can support each of your characters by potentially purchasing some chibi art, and all the funds go back into funding the game. So not only are you supporting your favorite character, but you will be supporting the game itself. So we're still working on Thordane. Thordane's in the works, so keep a lookout for that. But we have awesome t-shirts. We have, and they're all official. This is the only place you're gonna be able to get them. Official t-shirts. We got magnets. We got keychains. We got big stickers. Not only that, but not only the chibi arts, but also just the Everlast logo, if that's more up your alley. And I think that's it, Kyle. So thank you.
Sweet. So now that we got all that fun stuff out of the way, let's go ahead and dive, as for all of you that are here as players, let's go ahead and dive into the way that this game is going to work going from here on. So guys, please bear with us, especially for the session 0. We will, starting following sessions, definitely dive more into the actual game as we go. And so please bear with us as we continue to learn during this first session 0. Yeah, let's go ahead. And if you guys have your documents that I sent you on email, you feel free to pull them up and kind of just follow along as we go. So the game itself is split into 3 different phases. So it's split primarily between a holiday phase, which where you guys currently are, you are just finishing up a holiday phase. It's split into an adventuring phase. And I'm going to, because we've been playing D&D, I'm going to do a lot of kind of relating things back and forth to D&D. So hopefully we get that. So, but then you have your holiday phase, you have your adventuring phase, and then combat, which is kind of spread throughout the adventuring phase. So holiday phases, let's go ahead and explain these. So of course, every adventurer, they need to have a holiday. They need to have a break. I mean, what kind of adventurer goes out and literally just spends like their entire life like out in the wilderness? That's kind of weird. Maybe, I don't know. Depends. But everyone needs a break sometimes from the woes of the world. Otherwise, that could be quite draining on a person's spiritual soul. And physical body as well. Sometimes you just need a break. And so during this phase, basically, this is going to be the long rest that you get in D&D. So between adventures, you only get sleep, but the way that you go with a holiday phase is you go to a relatively, or a regional locale, and you take time resting and not doing a bunch of crazy stuff. So the things that you can do, rest and recovery. So during this time, you must choose where to make your lodging. So like, for example, let's just say you visited the city of Helix. You decide as individuals, you don't have to make a decision as an entire group. You can determine where the heck you want to go as individuals during your holiday phase. It's almost kind of like the breaking of the fellowship to a degree, where you plan to remit reunite in a certain location before you start your next adventure. But during this time, you recover hit points and stamina based on the lodging accommodation. So that is represented on daily holiday expenses. So if you guys go over to the right, you can camp. You can just find simple lodging for the time that you're there. You could find commercial lodging, which becomes a little bit more expensive. Inn lodging, aristocratic, luxurious. I mean, you guys have been staying at the Dolmon Onsen. That's pretty luxurious as far as the lodging goes. So it depends, and based on the type of lodging, you heal a certain amount of HP and stamina over the course of your holiday. A holiday phase, at minimum, lasts 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks, you get one holiday action to complete. Does that make sense? Every 2 weeks, one holiday action to complete. Depending on between adventures on how the pacing of the game goes, it's going to be primarily story-driven. Each holiday phase themselves are going to have different lengths. So there might be like you have like a brief respite, kind of like how it's been here in Takai Town, where we're not going to play out a holiday phase for 2 whole sessions like we did before we made a break. It's going to be a session, half a session at most. But it was a 2 weeks, so you should have gotten one holiday action to be able to do. During that time, you can spend a holiday action to shop, repair equipment. You guys are very lucky because you have Zill in your party. Zill, while on adventure, can repair equipment that is losing durability and that breaks. So that's something that not all parties are going to have. That's based off of his lifestyle. So his lifestyle allows him to do that. But you can spend one holiday action to repair your gear and buy stuff, essentially. There's different item packs that you can buy if you go down to the next page, item bundles. So you can buy item bundles that come with a bunch of different stuff to kind of replenish on supplies for your next adventure. Next, what we have is Adventurers Guild quests. So yes, Adventurers Guild quests are going to be maybe combat related, potentially. But every time you go into an Adventurers Guild, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll on a table of certain quests per locale that are going to appear. You can choose to undertake those quests. This is going to be a primary way to earn money during your course. So you can just basically undertake that, make a simple check, depending on what it's going to be. And if you succeed, you get a certain amount of money to be able to pocket. So we're going to go ahead and do that. The next is training regiments. So something that we did implement is proficiency with armor and proficiency with weapons. We're still keeping that. However, during your time, you can continue to train, which you gain large amounts of experience based on what your weapon or armor that you're using and based on your current proficiency with that. You can go to spiritual guidance. And so one of the new functions that are taking place in Everlast are to keep from murder hoboism, which I feel like tends to happen in like role-playing games, particularly D&D, where you feel like I can do whatever I want. I'm way more powerful than everyone. I can just kind of step all over people, and no one can do anything. An entire city of guards can't do anything against me. Basically, there is a virtue and vice in spiritual decay. And so throughout the course of an adventure, I'm going to, as a Fate Weaver, depending on an action that you take, things that you witness, particularly based on the things that are like your fears or the things that like you look at like, oh my gosh, like that's something I really like strive to be, or like different encounters, I'm going to be asking you to make Fates checks. Fates checks are going to be different types of checks dependent on the circumstance. So it could be a faith check. It could be something like you're trying to save somebody from like a boulder or something. I don't know. And you make a strength check. Whatever the fate check is going to be, you either go gain points of misery, which points of misery you're going to track on your sheet, that are equal to your total faith modifier. Once you exceed your faith modifier of misery, you go down. Once you hit 0 on your on your misery modifier, you go up. And so it's kind of like this like sliding scale of like the choices that you make, the things that you encounter, and how you deal with them. You're either becoming more of a heavenly creature or you're becoming more of a hellish creature. it gets to the point where you have, on one end of the spectrum, you have your virtuous. In the middle, you have the fact that you are, and like, so you get certain buffs by being virtuous. Everybody starts their adventure in neutral. And that's just kind of how it goes. You don't get any buffs. It's just kind of like your normal state. But then the further misery you get, you kind of start to fall from grace from misery 1, misery 2, misery 3. What ends up happening if you gain points of misery is what you end up doing is if you end up failing a fates check like pretty badly, you roll for madness. And basically what ends up happening in that madness chart, which is on here a little bit further down, it could be simple things as you just go quiet for a little bit. It could be things where it's just like you become like really prideful and sure of yourself. Like the spiritual effects are beginning to and you get like certain status ailments based on that. However, if you roll bad enough on the insanity, you could basically become Gollum, where like you pretty much run away from your group, and you've witnessed something that is so damaging to your spirit and your soul that you basically go into like hermitage. It could send you into retirement, early retirement. So if you're bad enough, or like if you are a very viceful person, that could end your adventure just then by retiring. Or worst of the worst, you just don't feel like you want to live anymore, and one thing leads to another. It's supposed to be a real spiritual battle. And I was really trying to figure out a way to be able to really implement that into a tabletop RPG that still gives you free will to be able to do things, because a fates check isn't always going to be negative. Fates checks can also be positive things. So if I'm like, Luksalia, make a fates check for that. Don't be like, oh my gosh, like what am I doing? Just make the fates check, and I will let you know whatever happens with the result. So it'll be good. And so, but the thing with the spiritual guidance is if you have gained points of misery and you're about to move into points of vice and like vice versa, you can go spend a action to do spiritual guidance, meaning meeting with someone at like a local church, temple, shrine, whatever, to be able to discuss the things that are wrong with your spirit. And basically the result of this, you can go volunteer, you can do all those kinds of things, kind of just some flavor for that. You end up removing points of misery, which can bring you to the virtuous state or take you out of the state of vice. And additionally, it helps you recover mana, which is very difficult to do outside of a few actions in the game. So that's one thing that you can do. You can forge new paths. One thing that's really interesting about this is while you're spending your holiday phase, you can decide to be like, all right, I want to explore like the local regions. Maybe we're going to be on an adventure here soon. So basically, you're just going to make a check. If you're successful on the check, then when you are adventuring through that region, it's going to be less likely that you encounter things on the road. Basically, things like that. Your travel's going to be easier. You're not going to get lost. You're going to know the path, basically. You can do things like research. So one of the new things that I've added is being able to get books, scrolls, codexes, all kinds of things during your adventure. While they might not seem like they do a whole lot, you can spend time during your holiday researching it, and you get certain buffs and boons. You can gain points of experience in things. You can gain points of experience in like AP, like which are ascension points that you need to unlock skills later on down the road. Things like that. You get like really good buffs for like reading and like studying and doing that kind of stuff for books. And they have like a certain number of things depending on the book, and you get, as you continue to progress further in that book, the checks are going to be more difficult to make. But you get permanent, basically, buffs to you as you read certain things, as you begin to build knowledge about the world around you and the secrets of Alamnia. You can engage in diplomacy. Diplomacy is a interesting thing. If you want to make a good impression on a locale, if there's like somewhere that you know you need to go eventually and you're not sure if you're going to be welcome, you can go there and make diplomacy with a local lord or whoever's in charge of like the small locale. this is going to take into account base discrimination that they have against you and your culture, particularly in their race. But basically what you do is you make checks and role play out a conversation based on like what you want. Different people that you're going to talk to, they're going to value different things. It's not going to be like the same like type of role every time you go. So they're going to value different things. So you might at one point be like, hey, we need help with something, and that might really rub someone the wrong way. Or you maybe go and just like, I just need lodging, and we're going to get out of your hair as fast as possible. That might be something they like. And so like you can role play things however you see fit, which is good, being able to ask like local people you meet on the road, do you know anything about this local lord like that could help me as far as getting into their good graces? So things like that. So you can engage in diplomacy, and at that point, what you can do is unlock cheap to free housing during holiday phases if you wish to go take holiday there, so you're not spending money on things. That's the primary thing that you can do. But then it increases your reputation as well. So that's something that could be really nice as well. And then holiday related traits. So again, Zill has the ability to do like crafting and stuff during his holiday phase and sell his stuff or just make new items. And then the last thing that you could potentially do is visit home, wherever that might be. So let's say, for example, you guys are in Helix during your holiday phase. Zill, you don't have to do a whole lot to visit home because you are home. Or let's just say, for example, Luksalia wants to visit back in the Silverwood or like do something like that where she's from. That's going to take, based on the amount of distance, certain amount of action. So let's say you only have like 2 weeks. Luxalia's probably not going to make it to the Silverwood, which is pretty much across the entire map in that time. So it's things that you do, but you can use this to progress kind of like your own story, like things that you've learned, continue to build relationships, like those types of things. But additionally, it will allow you to be able to additionally recover stamina and recover HP, depending, and actually remove points of misery as well, as you kind of like come to terms or like be in like a comfortable place with the people that you're with. It's kind of like taking a break from just your things and just being with family. You can also do like small things like try to tame wild beasts, like that kind of stuff during your holiday phase. But if you guys look at this guide that I've given you, there are a bunch of things such as the currency exchange rates, the currency in Everlast. Actually, at the start of the 6th Age, it became a coin, which is Evershills, which are small, little iron pieces, very roughly, crudely hammered out. They're basically worth, in the equivalence of this money, they're basically worth like 10 cents to like American USD. And then you have Evercoin, which those are silver coins. They're definitely much better made. That's actually the main currency that people use throughout the continent. So Evercoin is like the equivalent of like $1 in USD. And then finally you get Everpiece, which is about the equivalent of $10, and they're large gold coins. They're less frequent to find, and they usually are like correct collector's type items. Yeah, so as far as that goes, I just saw a chat. Do you gain money and items for battles? Yes, you do, depending. If you defeat a roaming wolf in the wilderness, you're not going to get money from that combat. You might be able to like loot it for like things like furs and meat and that kind of stuff. But if you're like fighting like other, like let's say bandits, you might be able to take a coin purse that's off them for money and stuff. So that's a really good question. Thanks for asking. And then you can do different types of things on holiday to basically prepare. It's supposed to prepare yourself for the adventure ahead. So moving on to the next phase, which is the adventuring phase. Essentially during this phase, this is where the meat and potatoes of Everlast comes in. So you have started an adventure. Essentially what you're doing is you're going into the vast unknown, usually with a general task at hand that you're attempting to complete, that you will encounter either at the very end of your holiday phase or as you begin just traveling. And so with this in mind, you're going to be going into the world at large and trying to complete whatever task that you're there. While you're during this adventuring phase, the things that you're going to do is at the very beginning, the party is going to split themselves between 4 different roles. The roles are going to be as follows: the Wayfinder. So the Wayfinder is basically your guide. They're going to lead you to the destination that you're at. It looks like Belbin did... Oh, Belbin, are you there? Looks like Belbin had to check out, so we might be without him.
Yeah, he had to go.
Okay, so we're without him for the rest of the stream, but that's Belbin, everybody. But anyway, so the Wayfinder, basically, they're in charge of guiding players to a certain location, and they use knowledge, wisdom, focus, and influence as far as stats go to make those checks. The next one is the Hearthbinder. So this person is basically the person who is in charge of setting up camp. Welcoming new guests, doing different types of things during resting periods while you're on your adventure. They're really useful in a lot of those aspects. But they use piety, wisdom, focus, and charm for most of their checks. The next one is going to be your tracker. And so the things that they're going to be in charge with are things like hunting for food that you need to eat, because go figure, you have to eat. But for hunting for food, but also scouting as well. So they can scout like areas up ahead and like that kind of stuff and get certain information based off of that. And they use their dexterity, their stealth, their knowledge, and their wisdom modifiers for that. And then the last person is the Watchman. So this person kind of sticks with the party, and where their primary role is like observing the general vicinity around. So, for example, let's just say if a scout misses, like a group of bandits coming upon the party, the Watchman is in charge of figuring out, basically spotting. Otherwise, you incur a round of surprise attacks by them. So they're in charge of like your general vicinity and like keeping a lookout, basically. And then they also gain extra benefits, like when you guys are resting. You gain extra benefits for keeping lookout, and like you can do other things while you're watching. Basically, that. If you have more, so the typical way that the breakdown is supposed to be with the number of players in Everlast is, generally speaking, you want 4 to 6 people in your party. So if you do have more than 4, everybody else that's in it are going to be under the Watchman role. And so every role has to be filled, and no one can take more than one role on at a time. And yeah, basically you go to the Watchman role at the very end of that. And so things that you can do during that period of time, travel. So basically the first time when you make your leave, the Wayfinder is going to be making rolls for like your initial leaving of the city. And that kind of determines like how things are going for the adventure. Essentially what ends up happening at that point is you begin making your way to whatever destination you want. Various encounters will happen along the road. It's going to take some time to travel from one area to another. It's an entire continent, essentially. And so what you end up doing is you have periods of rest. And so during those periods of rest, you can do certain things, such as playing an instrument. Those give you various benefits that you guys can read at your discretion. You can do contemplation, which contemplation you can use an action. So every resting action that you can take while you're resting is a 2-hour-long action. You can rest, or you can contemplate, and maybe if your check is good enough, you can ask me as the Fate Weaver whatever question that you want. You can socialize, building relationships with NPCs that you're traveling with, building relationships with each other, giving you guys bonuses for the next day, basically. You could do ritual prayer, which allows you to essentially recover mana, which is kind of a valuable resource if you want to utilize your arts. You can forage, so you can do things like gathering. So you can forage different types of herbs, food, that kind of stuff, and you basically roll from a table if you do that. And you can create healing items and stuff with that. So that's something that's interesting that you can do. You can fish, which is another way while you're sitting and resting to be able to get food, to be able to feed yourself. Hunting as well. Like I said, the tracker gains further advantages when they do attempt to hunt. You can mine, so Zil that might be something that's good for you. If there are areas around you that are like boulders, rocks, caves, that kind of stuff, like you can spend some time mining, doing something like that. You can spend time mending people. So if someone's like really bad on HP, you can use an item called med kits to be able to help people. Essentially what you'll be doing that you kind of have to do is eating meals. So the way that works is small creatures, which basically are fairies. If you're a fairy adventurer, you have to have half a pound of food a day. For medium-sized adventures, you have to have 1 pound of food a day, and for large-sized creatures, you have to have 2 pounds of food a day in order to keep from gaining weariness, which I guess in D&D terms would be points of exhaustion. They do different things, but it's kind of similar. And then you can use traits. Pretty much every single path / patronage has traits that they can use during their rest actions. Keep watch. While people are sleeping, you take a rotation of keeping watch to not be surprised by attacks. And then sleeping. Sleep is very important in order to not gain points of weariness. Each adventure within 24 hours has to sleep at least 6 hours. Does that make sense? Sweet. Mm-hmm. The next aspect of the game that you can do while you are on the adventure phase is dungeoning. So dungeons are going to work a little bit different than how we've done them in the past, as opposed to just like, oh, nice, like kind of just like how everything else was played out. You establish a marching order and you guys move on a priority. So you guys determine based on like your marching order, like who goes first, second, third, fourth, fifth, etc. At that point, you get movement that you can spend in a turn as you make your way through a dungeon, and then you can have basically one support action to like investigate, do something. If combat starts, that starts its own separate thing. There's going to be lots of role-playing opportunities. So for example, you're going to meet people along the way, things that will like lead to plot hooks, things that will like, for example, you find a wandering merchant. These things are going to be things that I'm going to be rolling as the Fate Weaver, things that you encounter. But there are going to be guaranteed things per adventure to kind of help with plot and point you in the right direction. But roleplay, this is where roleplay is going to be a part of Everlast going forward. And then overcoming obstacles. So things like rivers, things like mountains, things like, I don't know, big lakes, whatever the case, waterfalls, these are going to start becoming much more important. And once that starts happening, we're going to make various checks. We're going to have role-playing opportunities for that, and it's going to be a solid thing. Do you guys have any questions so far? I know that's a lot that we're going over.
It's a lot, but I think ultimately overall we will get used to it.
Yeah.
We're all learning together.
We're all learning together, and I'm going to guide you through it all and pretty much hold your hands for the first few times that we go through these phases. Please, on your guys' own time, read through the documents that I gave you. That might give you a general idea of things that you can do, look forward to. That'll be really helpful, but please feel free. I'm very much a Fate Weaver that will help you guys going forward. So we're going to go ahead and continue on.
Yeah, the questions will come, I'm sure.
Questions will come, absolutely.
For now, we're good.
Yes. So we already went over Fates checks and how important those are, which is why it's really important when I am doing my session zeros with you guys, really flesh out your character as far as personality goes, the things that they're afraid of, the things like I'm going to work with you. We're going to continue chats outside of the game and whatnot to be able to dive deeper into this. One thing to be able to help with development too is Dana and I, we're going to be doing the Everlast Podcast, which basically every month we're going to be putting together like what happened over the course of the month in Everlast. We're going to be discussing things. We can bring you guys, like some of you guys on to be able to help out with some of that. And it's going to be something that, oh yeah, got to stretch it out. Oh, thank you. But anyways, we're going to be talking with you guys to flesh out your characters. What were your characters' internal thoughts? What were they thinking? What, as a person, were you thinking when certain events happened? This will kind of be good for not only yourselves to kind of understand your character a little bit more and kind of desires and fears, but also for everybody watching to be able to understand what's going on in the mind of Zil, Luksalia, Yuki, Belbin, and Thordain. So every now and then, like once a month, we're going to have a show. And if there's like a specific like couple sessions that like are like focused on like an individual character for whatever reason, we might ask you guys to come on the Everlast podcast to be able to talk things through. So
also, may I step in really quick, Kyle?
Yeah.
All right. Also, as far as like the podcast itself goes, we will be taking questions. So those of you who haven't joined the Discord and use Discord is a great place for us as a community to get together and be able to talk outside of the stream. Especially during this stream, I'm not going to have that much of an opportunity to converse with each and every one of you. However, if you do have questions about characters, if you have questions about scenarios or things that happen during the campaign, feel free to, in the Discord, there is an Everlast section, and you can feel free to ask questions there. We also do have a Facebook and a Twitter channel. All those links are in the About section below. Feel free to tweet at Everlast, or feel free to go to the Fantasy Forge Facebook page and ask questions, and we will be sure to answer those on the podcast as well. So that's your opportunity to get your questions in. Sorry, continue.
Numerable whom. Yes, my voice is a lot like Forge's because we're twins. Go figure. Yep. We share a lot of the same DNA, and our voices kind of, when we're going on and on, kind of sound very similar. So, yes, it's great. But moving forward, here we go. So that's kind of the general gist of the adventuring phase. The adventuring phase is going to take you basically between holiday phases. And so an adventuring phase might take you from a city to a location, which then turns you around to go to another location for some grandiose finale of an adventure. But then there is going to be an inevitable close of the adventure. And essentially what that's going to happen is we're going to go into holiday phases and going forward from there. Another interesting point that I too want to add about dungeoning is the primary reason for dungeons is not every dungeon is filled with evil, horrible creatures, but it's more like uncovering mysteries, flavor, but also it's going to be one of the primary ways that you get loot. So if you come across a dungeon, there's going to be much, much, much less of a focus on item acquisition in Everlast. It's going to be really more of a focus on narrative roleplay going forward. I mean, it's going to be really nice to have certain things, but I don't want this game to be so driven by when do I get my next big, improved, amazing item that like it takes away from the fun of everything else, and it takes away from the message. Being able to utilize what you have during these adventuring phases and manage your equipment is going to be something that I think overall is going to add more to like the reality of kind of the pressing situation that you're in, as opposed to being like treasure all over the place. There might be times that you come in, like across treasure hoards. Like I think of like Bilbo Baggins when he was with the party of dwarves. Like he pretty much has like this knife that he carries with him, and then he encounters this troll horde. He ends up getting Sting, and he doesn't get any other weapons for the rest of his adventures in The Hobbit. Heck, it's even passed down to his nephew Frodo. And so it's one of those things where there's going to be a less of a focus on like that kind of stuff. Also, continuing forward, we're going to move to the last phase of the game, which is combat. So combat in most, whether it's Pathfinder, D&D, whatever role-playing that you're going to do, even things like Warhammer, Middle-earth strategy battle game, they all have similar elements, and I think you guys are going to catch on to this relatively quickly, especially since we did play D&D before together. A lot of the combat as far as progression and stuff is going to look relatively similar as most of the roleplay games do, but there's going to be specific elements of it that are going to, I think, make Everlast stand out above and beyond. One of the things that's kind of a caveat that I do want to warn is what this is going to require from you guys is a little bit more tracking on the things that happen during combat, to not only keep you guys focused, but to be able to allow combat to roll smoothly. So things that you need to understand is things like enmity. So how much basically you're provoking other creatures to be able to attack you, and the things like managing the actions that you do to basically keep yourself from dying, keep the party from dying. You also have things like durability of your weapons, durability of your armor. There's certain aspects of the game that, like, if you're hit by a weapon attack, your armor's going to lose durability. If they completely miss you, it's not going to lose durability. Certain aspects with, like, your weapons, if you, like, hit things true, you're not going to lose durability. But if they block against your weapon's going to lose durability. Things like that. And so one of the things that I really want to emphasize going forward is note-taking. Make sure you guys have notepads going forward to calculate the things that happen within the turn of combat. So that's something that I'm going to ask you guys to really step up on as far as that goes. Yeah. Oh, and if you really don't have any type of notepads, you can go online and buy your merch for your character as far as a... No, I'm not... You guys don't have to buy anything, but... It's something cool.
Notepads coming soon.
Yeah, notepads coming soon. That'd be something that's really cool. So things like determining enmity and that kind of stuff. So let's just go ahead and just jump into the basic combat progression. So what happens when combat begins? So let's just say you guys are in a dungeon or out on an adventure on the road. Essentially what you guys are going to be encountering is conflict of whatever kind, whether it's wild beasts, whether it's evil people, whatever the case, you're going to have to take up your sword and you're going to have to engage combat. So step one, you determine surprise. So kind of similar to D&D, if you track someone, if you, for example, a tracker roll, if they're able to spot someone before you could, as a group, attempt to make either an attack of surprise. So let's just say the tracker doesn't have time to go back to the party. They can make an attack of surprise and begin combat as the party is attempting to catch up. Or maybe if it's a single creature, you can attempt to slay them in one round, in one turn of combat, basically. Or if your group is together, you can attempt to ambush, basically getting a free round of combat before they can do anything about it. So determine that if that applies, or if basically enemies are able to surprise you as well. So that's like failed checks if you're like keeping watch at night. Like they might jump and attack you in the middle of the night, whatever the case. Step two, establish your starting positions. So what this means is if you guys are kind of coordinating to begin, let me know on a battle map. This whole section in the middle where the map is going to open up to become a live streamed battle. So I'm going to be able to move pieces around with all of the Dwarven Forge terrain that I have. And we're going to be able to combat. But you're going to have to tell me where you want to start in regards to the battle map that we have. If you guys, if combat just starts naturally, I will line you guys up as best as I can, thinking where you guys are already positioned. So we have that. We have the next step. You roll initiative priority. So the way that initiative priority works is, as you guys know, the stats are distributed really weird. So there's 7 stats that you have, well, weird in comparison to the other games. So the way that we have stats, we have strength, agility, fortitude, mind, faith, charisma, and accuracy. So the way that yes, there we go. Thank you, Dane, for pointing that out. So we have those. Those have a total, so as opposed to D&D and like Pathfinders in the traditional game, they have a D20 that they typically roll. The main actually dice that we use in Everlast is a D16. It is a dice that doesn't really exist. It's very difficult to have, but everything is going to be primarily on a 16-point scale. And so what ends up happening is we jump into different like roles for different skill checks. So you have a 16-point scale, and then what you do is you divide whatever that is by 2, rounded down, and that becomes your survival modifier. So your survival checks. It's your modifier for your main stat. And so like, let's say you have a base 16 in your strength, you have a survival check of 8, essentially. And stats cannot rise above that 16-point cap. And so like if you max everything out, you've maxed everything out. Great, good for you. But most likely characters are not going to be able to max out all of their stats, even at level 10 at the highest level. And so what that does is your survival checks are going to be things like defense. Similar to D&D, it's going to be like your like checks if like someone attacks you with a fireball spell, roll a constitution saving throw. It's going to be kind of similar where it's like you have your fortitude check, but you use that but you basically use the survival check modifier for that. What that does is it further breaks down into 2 smaller stats. So for example, for strength, it breaks down into physical for physical weapon attacks and elemental for elemental weapon attacks. How you determine those is you take the modifier. So you have that 16 in your strength, half that, so you have 8, and then between those 2 modifiers, it splits, you choose whatever values you want up to 8 into any category. So you can choose to put all 8 points into your physical modifier, all 8 points into your elemental modifier, or split them more evenly, however you wish to do it. But do note that these are going to be your more offensive skill checks that you have are going to be those. So that's how it kind of breaks down into that. And so, for example, with the physical modifier, physical attack weapons are going to have like their rolled dice value, and then you add your physical modifier. Elemental weapons are going to do the same. The way that priority initiative works is agility breaks down into 2 stats, which are dexterity and stealth. Based on your dexterity modifier, you add that to basically just a straight D16 roll. It's a dexterity skill check. And whatever your value is your turn in priority. The higher the value, that's where you start in combat. The lower the value, that's where you end. Unlike D&D, however, if you roll like a natural 1, which is the critical failure, you do not skip a turn, you still get your turn in combat. It's just at the very bottom of combat. So that's how that goes. So you determine that. And then normal progression happens. So basically everything loops after this point. So you got step 4, establish starting enmity. So this again is something that is unique to Everlast. The way that works, if you guys look over on determining enmity, when determining enmity at the start of combat, simply apply modifiers based on your path. So whether you're an attacker, a supporter, or a defender. Enmity is determined by rolling 1d8 as opposed to the d16, and then you add your influence skill check modifier to that. If you roll an 8 or less, you start with 0 enmity. If you roll a 9 through a 12, you get +1 enmity, and if you roll a 13 or higher, you get +2 enmity. Basically, the way that enmity works in this game is everyone's going to attack kind of whatever they seem fit as a Fate Weaver, someone who provokes. However, if they are successfully taunted as a support action, or if they see that like someone's undoing their work, that's another good example of it. Like they did all this damage to this character, and then the supporter comes in and heals all of that damage that they just did. They're going to get pretty pissed about that. Or things like landing critical hits. Those are going to gain the attention, gain the focus of characters. And so enmity doesn't really affect you unless, for example, you're the defender and you're trying to keep the big monsters off of the rest of your party. So what you're going to do is you're going to try, as a defender primarily, boost your enmity as high as you can, get the attention of a creature, and they are pretty much forced to attack you. They pretty much are forced to attack the person with the highest enmity value. So let's say, for example, Yuki, as an attacker, has a 2 enmity and attacks a creature, the first attack that they receive. Yuki is officially the highest enmity that has attacked them. They're going to attack Yuki, primarily, seeing her as the primary threat. However, if Zil, from a distance, attempts to taunt that creature and successfully taunts them, Zil might have an enmity of 3, and that creature will automatically switch course. However, as a Fate Weaver, depending on the situation, I can, as a support action on their end, choose to ignore whatever enmity or whatever provoked person that I'm at. And that's going to be primarily based on like their mind modifier, if they're like physically capable to do so. So if they're a smarter creature, I'll be like, all right, this person like is trying to be strategic in the things that they're doing. They're not going to be provoked quite as easily. If that's the case, they're going to make a contested check with the person who has the enmity provoked. On a successful check, they're free to attack whoever they want. And then the person who had the enmity has to regain the enmity of that creature. Every single turn at the conclusion of combat, based on certain circumstances, you re-roll basically enmity. But you keep the enmity that you have, but you determine if you lose enmity or gain enmity at the top of every single new round. So the way that that's going to go is if you look a little bit below that, it says when determining enmity at the top of consecutive rounds, apply the following modifiers based on the previous round. So there's things such as Agitator, Threat, Aggressor, Healer, Helpless, Hidden, and Pacifist that adds to various modifiers. So basically what you do is you roll your D8 plus your Fortitude or plus your Influence modifier, and then add certain checks based on the enmity modifiers below. So there is a passive trait that defenders can attempt to choose called Maximum Enmity. They automatically gain +2 on that roll, basically, every single turn at the top of combat. So that's one thing that they can choose to do. There's Agitator. Basically, you add +1 for every missed attack against you. So if a creature is attacking you and they miss, you can add modifiers for every single missed attack. You gain Threat, so +1 for every 8 points of damage you inflict on a foe. Again, this is important to keep track of the things that you do, how much damage you inflict, that kind of stuff, specifically for enmity. You gain Aggressor for each, so +1 for each different enemy you attack. So instead of just focusing all your attacks on one enemy, this could be something that's really good for a defender, being able to attack 2 separate when you have the opportunity, 2 separate creatures with an attack. It just gives you more modifiers. Healer, for every 10 points of HP healed to self and others. Every 10 points that you heal, whether it's an item, whether it's an art, whatever the case, you gain 1 point of additional modifier, not enmity, additional modifier to determine your enmity. Helpless, +1 point for every consecutive round you are unconscious. So you're laying unconscious. Basically, enemies are going to look at you as like a dying person, and they're going to try to finish you off the longer that you are unconscious. So the goal is to try to get you back up on your feet from being unconscious. And then Pacifist. So these are things that you gain to start losing points of enmity, potentially. Pacifist. If the player uses a turn action, basically you use your entire action to do something. There's specific turn actions lined out in your action phase thing. Hidden. So -2 if the player remains hidden for an entire turn. So that's something that you can attempt to do to decrease that modifier as well. And then for the starting enmity, the defender gains +2, attacker +0, and supporter -2. So things like that. But for each of the top of every round, if you roll, so that 1d8 plus your influence modifier, plus or minus whatever modifiers that you have from the things that you were tracking, on a roll less than 3, you reduce your enmity by 2. On a roll of 4 to 7, you reduce your enmity by 1. On a roll of 8 to 12, your enmity stays the same as it was the previous round. On a roll of 13 through 16, your enmity increases by 1, and on a roll of a 17 or plus, it increases by +2. Does that make sense? If not, just think about it. It's a lot, but we'll get used to it. Yes.
Just with how it all works makes sense, but on each round, are you tracking our enmity, or is that something we should be keeping in our notes?
That's something you should be keeping in your notes.
So we should know what enmity
you should know what enmity you have, and I will also be making notes of it too, as far as like how I'm controlling my creatures. Does that make sense?
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Basically, creatures that you have gained, you have provoked a previous round, follow you into the next round. That doesn't change. The only thing that changes is your enmity value depending on whatever you roll in modifiers. Once we get further, like there's going to be less to explain. Honestly, one of the things that I learned when I was playing D&D for the first time was the sheer amount of rules that were in this freaking book. If you're familiar with D&D, this should be a little bit more familiar and easier to learn. But man, I can't tell you the amount of time that it took me to learn the rules to be a dungeon master in Dungeons and Dragons. Holy smokes. It's like, it's intense. But the more that the players learn, the more that we all get comfortable with it, it'll start to become more seamless. Things, we'll be able to like track things more regularly and keep engaged as best as we can. So, so much explanation. Yes, I agree. However, we are going to, it'll be less. It's not going to be like whole sessions of, oh, here's how this works again. Here's how this works again. But this is just for everybody to know, especially our players, going forward. So that's a new thing. Step 5. So that was step 4, establish enmity. Step 5. Each player and opponent takes turns in combat. So based on your order, starting from the highest value rolled to the lowest value rolled, you take turns in combat, to which during that time, you're given movement actions. So your movement is tied to your size. So if you're a small size creature, you have a base movement of 10 feet. If you're a medium-sized creature, you have a base movement of 15 feet. And if you are a large creature, you have a base movement of 20 feet. You gain plus 5 feet for every point in your modifier in your agility stat. So for example, if you're a medium creature, if you have a maxed out 16 stat, you can have a 55 movement speed, which is 5 feet in combat is 1 space on the battle board, essentially, how that works. Unlike D&D, each round in combat lasts for 10 seconds as opposed to 6 seconds, meaning there's more actions potentially that you can do on your turn, especially as you level up. So based on whether you're an attacker class, a defender class, or a supporter class, as you level up, you unlock certain basically actions that you can use. So you can move. You can use attack actions. Attackers inherently have more attack actions. By the time they hit level 10, they're going to have 3 attack actions and 2 support actions. Defenders, they level up kind of a little bit more evenly. By the time they end, though, they're going to have 2 attack actions and 3 support actions. That 3rd support action is going to be mostly used for reflex support actions, which I'll explain later. And then supporters are going to, at the very end, have 2 attack actions and 3 support actions. However, and again, this is all based on player level, depending on what you have as we make our way through. Those are going to be very much more focused on supporting whatever they can. You can use all of those in a single turn at level 10. Starting at level 1, you get 1 attack action, 1 support action. So the game progresses as you progress through the game. It should be easier to take on the new rules. So especially if you're new to the game, I recommend starting at level 1. Because it's less to take in. You'll kind of learn the game as you go, and you'll gain new things, new features, and more things to do, but you'll already be comfortable with how the game works, so it won't be as much of a burden. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Cool. You guys are kind of thrown into the lion's den right now, so bear with me, study up, it'll be good. And so you can make attack actions, which are basically weapon attacks, so you attack with your held weapon. That's it. You could do attack arts, which are, again, using mana and like those types of things to do like stronger, I guess it's like spells in D&D, like stronger attacks. And then you can use, additionally, you can use it in order to do like physical contests. So like things like grabbing someone, pushing someone over, tripping someone. That's an attack action, essentially. Your support actions are going to be reflex support actions first and foremost, which I'll explain later. You can attempt to hide, basically making stealth checks to attempt to hide as long as you're not in a field of view. You can attempt to interact with things. And I'm not talking about like talking to each other in combat, because that just happens. I'm talking about like, here's a boulder, I want to push it down a cliff to be hopefully hit someone. That's like a support action that you could use. Using an item, so not an item from your backpack, but every adventurer has an adventurer's pouch of on-hand items that they can use. Basically, during your resting periods, whatever the case, you take items from your storage, your backpack storage, and you stuff it in there, and it's basically on-hand stuff. So there's that. you can switch equipment. So you can switch like your held item to like something on your belt, something on your back, whatever the case. You can use a support action to do that. You can taunt an enemy. So basically the way that works is contested influence skill checks. And so basically the person just has to be in earshot, or the creature has to be in earshot. And you can like basically point them out and attempt to taunt them into focusing their attentions on you. However, do remember, if they are currently engaged with someone who has a higher enmity than you, regardless of whether your provoke works, they're still going to stay on the person who has the higher enmity. Does that make sense? So if you have like a 1 enmity and someone's already attacking someone with 4 enmity, they're going to stay on that creature even if you succeed, and they're not even going to care about you because they're so enraged by the person that they're currently in combat with. And then arts. So various support arts, whether it's healing, whatever the case. You can do those. So those are support actions. Additionally, as part of a support action, you gain a reflex action, which are instantaneous actions that you do. Everybody has one of those that they can use over the course of an entire turn. How many people can play at the same time? 7 total, including a Fate Weaver, but I recommend 4 to 6 players for a well-rounded combat, especially combat experience. So as far as that goes. But as far as reflex actions, the things that you can do are pretty simple. You can guard. So if you have a 2-handed weapon, if you have a buckler, which is like a small shield, or a shield, you can attempt to guard, which basically what that does is it increases your DV and RV, which are your defense value, which guards against, which basically is your armor value against physical attacks, and your resilience value, which is your armor against elemental attacks. Does that make sense? Sweet. Cool.
Yes.
You can dodge. So if you're not someone who is probably carrying a shield or a big heavy weapon with you, you can attempt to avoid damage by dodging. Basically, you have to be wearing light armor. You can't be wearing heavy or medium armor. You have to be wearing light armor, and you cannot be wearing a heavy weapon or a shield. You can have a buckler on, but you can't have a heavy weapon or a shield. And basically, you make dex skill checks in order to and if you make a successful check on the attack, then you're able to completely avoid the attack.
Belbin.
Yeah, seriously. And then arts. So like a lot of defenders, a lot of their arts are specifically used for reflex support action. And so like it's things that you can do. For example, Zill, your character doesn't necessarily excel at using shields and bucklers so much. So like things like reflex support actions to be able to help. That's kind of like how you function a little bit more. And then the last actions are turn actions. So these are things, like I said, every round of combat is 10 seconds. And the way that it's supposed to work is, even though that there's a order for priority initiative, everybody attacks, like everything's kind of happening instantaneously. And your turn action is you're using up all 10 of those seconds to do something. And so basically the things that you can do is bide. So at that point, you could choose, like if you're running low on stamina, what you need to just do regular weapon attacks, you basically restore stamina equal to 1d4 plus 3. So you can kind of have like a quick breather in order to regain stamina. You can sprint, so basically move up to double your walking speed. That's a full turn action. You can't do anything other than that. You can defend, so if you can't have nothing to do, you can pretty much brace yourself against attacks, and it increases your DV and RV by +2. Something that you can do if you have like no other choice. Or if like a big attack you're assuming is coming, like you can like attempt to brace and attempt to block it that way. You can attempt to rescue. So someone who is unconscious, they cannot be healed by normal means, whether through potion or whether by arts. They have to be stabilized before that they can heal. And so by rescuing them, you can use a med kit. It's pretty much one way to do it. Or supporters have an ability that allows them to do that kind of at will, that they can attempt to pick. Basically, if you make checks, you can bring them up and stabilize them. And also, in addition, heal them a certain amount of HP. you can gain access to your bag. So let's say you've completely run out of things in your adventurer's pouch, and you're like, oh snap, I need stuff for my pouch. You can spend a turn moving stuff from your bag into your adventurer's pouch. That's one thing that you can do. And then different arts can take up to entire turn actions. For example, I know that Luksalia's path has a resurrection, which over the course of 2 turns uses like a turn action. So there's that. Going forward, does that make sense? I think that's
It's typically
yeah. Go ahead.
typically the more powerful the support action, it takes more time, or it just depends.
Kind of. So like it depends on like what the action is doing. Like for example, if you are trying to do something that's like an art that you're like charging up like something like really strong and unleashing, or if like you're really trying to like focus on something, you can do it. Like if you are preoccupied, like for example, like playing an instrument, if you're preoccupied doing something, you're not going to be able to provide any other actions. So like there's certain things that like do like turn actions that like basically render you unable to do other things.
Okay.
Cool.
Sounds good.
The way that death works, as especially how it's different from D&D, is the way that death works in D&D is basically when you hit 0 hit points, you fall unconscious. You have death saving throws, and if you succeed in a certain amount of death saving throws, like you either come back up, or if you fail them, you die. Essentially, the way that it works in Everlast is you are unconscious at 1 HP. So if you get hit basically from 1 HP or below, so I'll just go ahead and read it verbatim here. I think it explains it pretty well. So the moment that a player falls to 1 HP, they are considered unconscious. If an attack against a player who is above 1 HP brings them down to below 1 hit point, they must make a Fortitude survival check with a DC of 0 + 2 for each time the player falls unconscious during an adventure. On a failed check, they die. So it's pretty intense. Yeah, it's not fun. But once you've fallen unconscious, you go into the next category, which is fighting for your life. So while unconscious, at the bottom of the combat round, so after everybody has taken their turn in combat, the player must make a Fortitude survival check with a DC of 8 + 2 for each consecutive round unconscious. On a successful check, they become stabilized with 1 hit point, meaning you could be healed at this point. Like you are 1 hit point, but you are aware and you are able to be healed. So that's kind of your way of picking yourself up. But it gets more difficult the longer you are unconscious, which is why it's important to pick them up. Yes.
Quick question, and this isn't just, this isn't on your turn, this is at the bottom of the round.
At the bottom of the round, correct.
Okay. All
yeah,
right.
so if you are unconscious on your turn, you can't do anything. You're unconscious. Okay. And so like at the bottom of every round, you do that. So that is another difference too. Damage when you are at 1 hit point. So if a creature sees you unconscious and you receive damage. While unconscious, for each time the player receives damage, the player must make a Fortitude survival check with a DC of 6 + 2 for each attack landed against them. On a failed check, they die. So it's much easier to die as well as opposed to D&D. Rescuing. So again, picking someone up from the unconscious state. Players may attempt to rescue a player who is unconscious with 1 remaining hit point. While unconscious, a player cannot be healed by an art or any healing items, but rather must be resuscitated by a first aid kit or the dependable supporter trait. On a success, the player is stabilized and regains hit points based on the method used to rescue the player. So yeah, there's different values and they gain hit points for that, but it kind of like stabilizes them and gets them to the point where it's like they can survive a hit. Instant death. So if a player is damaged equal to half their remaining hit points rounded up and it drops their hit points to 0, they die instantly. So unlike D&D where it's your full hit point total, it's half of your hit point total. So make sure to keep your hit points topped off. That's the point. Like we're in D&D, like the way that it's supposed to be played is like you play with low HP. Like people get to a point where they're just like, ugh, which is kind of the point of the supporter role, to make sure that everyone's HP is topped off, especially with the path that Luksalia ended up choosing. It's kind of focused on keeping everybody's HP topped off. So something like an instant death doesn't happen. And then resurrection. A player must be willing to come back to life after they've dropped to 0 hit points, meaning they cannot have any points of vice. So the way that works based on the virtue and vice system is if they have points of vice, their soul themselves are unwilling to come back. They have basically been overcome by whatever evil's there and they're unwilling to come back. Where if they're neutral or virtuous, they are in a position, their spirit is in a position to be able to, basically come back to life. So basically that's why another reason it's important to keep yourself out of vice, because if you die, you can be resurrected, essentially.
So Belbin needs to be careful.
Yeah, well, everyone needs to be careful, but especially Belbin, yes.
Especially Belbin.
So that's how that works. Moving into Boons and Banes. And so these are different from normal status ailments and stuff. These are basically just passive effects that end up occurring on your character. So Boons, basically they're blessings from your patron. They can be something given by the chat. If they are part of the Patreon, they can choose to give hope to someone, or like something like that. Basically affect certain things. You might meet certain NPCs that are really strong that give you certain boons for certain things. Role playing allows you to gain certain boons. On the other hand, things like incurring points of vice, going into madness, doing those types of things, give you banes and stuff on your character. So there's 2 types of boons and 2 types of banes. The first type of boon is emboldened. So the player adds +2 to the value of their dice roll. This is not a modifier. This is to the value of the dice roll. So again, if you're rolling a d16, you roll, let's just say you rolled a 14, it automatically critically successes your roll to 16. And then you add whatever modifiers on top of it that you need. So that's how that works. And then the next one is hope, which is basically advantage in the D&D world, where you roll 2 of the same dice and you pick the highest value. Which those are going to be the boons that people are going to give to, the people in chat are going to give to the group. The 2 banes are basically the opposite of that. So you have struggle, which is the player reduces the value of their rolled dice by -2, not their modifier. So if you got a 16, there's no possible way with rolling struggle that you can critically succeed in something. If you get a 16, it automatically drops to a 14. Granted, a 14 is a freaking good roll anyway, but it automatically drops down to that. And then, it's not hope. That's a typo. It's despair. Despair is the next one, where it's basically disadvantage from D&D. So that's how that works. Moving on quickly to status ailments. There's a lot of them, so let's keep up. We'll just go one after another. So bleeding. So you guys will notice on your character sheets that next to your HP value, you have a bleeding, which is always going to be half of your maximum hit points rounded down. Basically what happens with bleeding is when a PC's maximum hit points falls to half rounded down, the player gains bleeding. Whenever the player is damaged by an attack, they must make a DC 10 Fortitude survival check. On a failed check, they receive an additional -1 times the player's level unresisted bleeding damage. So basically, you get additional damage on top of it. The next one is going to be blinded. So the way a lot of the status ailments work in this game is they stack on top of each other. And so you have if you get affected by one of blinded, you get a small kind of debuff. If you get affected by it twice in a time period, you get even higher. If you get affected by it a third time, it becomes really difficult. Which is why it's important to have healing items and those types of things, because you don't want it to occur. So it kind of leads, for example, let's just say a cultist decides to inflict blinded on someone. It's not like in D&D where it's just okay, they're blinded, they can't use that again. They can continuously use it on you and give you more stacks of that. It's pretty good. So anyways, blurred. Struggle on all weapon hit rolls. Obscured, so that's the second level. Despair on all weapon hit rolls, and then blinded, struggle and despair on all weapon hit rolls. So basically you are struggling to hit things. It's not impossible, but you're struggling. The next one is broken. So 1 stack stamina consumption is +1 on weapon attacks, +2 on broken, and +3 on shattered. And you gain the vulnerable on melee weapon attacks. So that's not fun. Burned. So Singed. Before making an attack action, make a DC 8 Fortitude survival check. On a failure, take 1d4 plus 2 flame damage before attacking. On 2, it's a DC 10 Fortitude survival check, and it's a 1d6 plus 2 flame damage. And on a 3, it's a DC 12 Fortitude survival check, and on failure, take 1d8 plus 2 damage. So it's basically whenever you make an attack roll, you have to roll, you incur damage if you fail. The next one is Charmed. So the PC can be commanded by the source of their charm. If the player is commanded, the PC must make a mind survival check with a DC equal to 8 plus the source's charisma modifier. On a failed check, the PC must follow the command. On a successful check, the ailment subsides. So you only have to resist it once in order for it to continue to work. Cursed. So this is not a fun one, especially for mana users. The PC cannot use any mana arts. So if you get cursed, you can use ones that have like occurrences. So like you can use it once per day or like once per rest. You can use it, but if you get afflicted with this, you can't use any mana arts. So you can lift curse with like remedies and like that kind of stuff, but it's not a fun thing to have, and it lasts for 24 hours unless removed in another way. Fear. So fear works differently in D&D, and typically in D&D what ends up happening is you become afraid of something and you run for the hills. In this game, there's 2 levels of fear. So if you get afflicted with 1 level, when afflicted, the PC must roll 1d6. On a roll of a 1 through 3, the PC gains the flight urge and must use their turn to run from the source of their fear, so similar to D&D. On a roll of a 4 through 6, the PC gains the fight urge and must spend their turn using only attack actions to attack the source of their fear. At the start of each of the PC's turns, they must make a DC 10 mind survival check. On a successful check, the fear subsides. The only difference between that and terror is the fear doesn't go away until the source of the fear is completely eliminated. So it's not fun. So fight or flight, that's kind of the way that it goes. How are you going to face up to the fear in that sense? So the next one
that's based on the roll of the dice.
That's based on the roll of the dice. The next one is Frozen. So that has 3 stacks. So Chilled, movement speed is reduced by -10 feet. Frozen, movement speed is reduced to 30 feet. And Frozen Solid, movement speed is reduced to 0 feet. So it's not fun to get that because you can't move. Poisoned. That has 3 stacks as well. On 1 stack of poisoning, which is nauseous, healing on the afflicted player is reduced by half. On poisoned, the PC cannot be healed. On venom poisoning, the PC cannot heal and loses -1d12 plus 2 hit points every hour. So that can kill you, potentially. And it lasts 1 hour for nauseous, 24 hours for poisoned, and you cannot remove it unless the status condition is removed for venom poisoning. The next status ailment is Stunned. These all last for 1 minute. So Static is the first stack of it. When making a support action, make a DC 8 Fortitude survival check. On a failure, the PC cannot perform that action. So basically support actions, it's like the opposite of Burned, where Burned inflicts damage when you attack. This one prevents you from doing support actions. Stunned. At the start of the PC's turn, they must make a DC 10 Fortitude survival check. On a failure, the PC cannot perform support actions on their turn at all. So not just one support action, any support actions on their turn. And then Paralyzed. At the start of the PC's turn, they must make a DC 12 Fortitude survival check. On a failure, the PC skips their turn in combat altogether. So that's fun. And then the next one is Stupor. So Stupor is a interesting one. It basically, you get this status ailment on you if you drink too much. If you are excessively like sleeping or like doing things like that, like you gain Stupor and it lasts for 12 hours. Skill checks, survival checks, and hit rolls are made with Despair. So yeah, don't do too much craziness. Stupor also takes effect if you drink or if you consume potions and elixirs more than twice per turn in combat. So you can't just like down 3 potions or like down 2 potions and like an ally gives you another potion. Like you gain Stupor because of like the crazy stuff going on inside of you, and that lasts for 12 hours, so that's not good. Vulnerable. Damage received by specific damage type is doubled. So if you're vulnerable to cutting damage, like blades and stuff are going to deal double damage. Weakness is the final status, or weariness is the final status ailment, and this is kind of like exhaustion in D&D, but it goes as follows. The first stack is tired. You're just tired. Skill checks are made with struggle. Healing from dice is reduced by healing from health dice is reduced to half of the rolled value rounded down. So the way that D&D works is you get a certain amount between long rests of like health dice that you get to roll when you take a short rest. In this game, you always get a specific value whenever you get 6 or more hours of sleep. So every 6 hours of sleep, you have a certain amount of dice that you always get to roll. And so when you sleep, in basically the state of being tired, you heal half of what you roll in a night of sleep.
I got stuff to help with that too. So
Yeah,
you get
exactly.
extra bonuses.
Number 2 is weary, so you gain weariness. So with 2 stacks, skill, survival, and fates checks are made with struggle. Healing by health dice is reduced by half rounded down. So instead of just skill checks, you also get survival and fates checks are made with struggle. Exhausted, which are 3 points. Movement speed is reduced by half. Skill, survival, fates, and hit checks are made with struggle, and the PC cannot heal with health dice. And then 4 is debilitated, which you just become unconscious. You can't die of exhaustion, basically, in my game. You can't die of weariness. You just become like a vegetable. You just become unconscious. So it's not good. Especially when you have like party members dragging you through everything. Yes, so that's good. Things that are also important to remember. Holding your breath. The way that works in this game, whether you're underwater, whether you're trying to hold your breath from noxious fumes, you hold your breath equal to 1 for minutes equal to 1 times your Fortitude modifier. So at a maximum of 8 minutes for any given person with a max Fortitude stat. You can hold your breath for up to 8 minutes, which is crazy. So if you run out of breath underwater or are unable to catch your breath, you begin to choke at the end of that minutes. For every 10 seconds that pass, you lose minus 1 d10 hit points. And then the last caveat is you cannot regain hit points or become stabilized from unconscious state until you are able to catch your breath again. So you can't like be like suffocating and then someone's like heal, 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 and it's just like, oh, I gained breath. It's like that's not how that works. You just suffocate to death. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's just see. Other things to keep. Weapon and armor durability. So this is another thing that is specific to Everlast and how it is going to work. You're going to have to keep track of weapon durability. It says on this chart down here, basically common armors have 20 durability all the way up to 50 for special rares. And weapons and that type of stuff have various durabilities as well. Basically how that works, for every landed attack on a PC's armor, so starting with armor durability, so whenever an attack with a weapon lands against your armor, the armor loses minus 2 durability. If the creature misses an attack against the PC's armor's defense value or resilience value by 1 to 4, the equipped armor loses minus 1 durability, and you deflect the blow, basically. If the attacker misses an attack against the PC's DV or RV by 5 or more, the attack either misses altogether or the attack merely scratches the surface of the armor, inflicting no loss in durability. So basically, if you successfully block an attack and they roll bad against that, it's not going to do anything to your armor. If a set of armor is dropped to 0 durability, it is what is considered the fragile state. In this state, the armor loses minus 1 durability to its defense value and resilience value. And when a weapon attack lands, the attacker makes a strength the attacker, so not you, so whatever the creature is attacking you, makes a strength survival check with a DC based on the armor's rarity. If the creature fails a roll, the armor set stays together in the fragile state, and the DC is reduced by minus 1 for the next check. If the creature succeeds on the attack, the armor tears and breaks into pieces, rendering it unusable and unfixable. So you basically just lose a piece of armor. If an adventurer has clothes in their inventory or on, you can wear clothes on underneath your armor. It doesn't add any additional armor value, but they are considered to be wearing this underneath their equipped armor. If the PC's armor breaks, they are now wearing the clothing set, essentially. Clothing in Traveler clothing has no durability. If a creature lands an attack on the PC wearing one of these types of clothing, the clothing tears and their DV and RV are calculated by their base defense and resilience values. So that's how that works. For bucklers and shields, it basically works the same way, but it's like if you use your buckler and shield to guard, let's just say it still hits, your buckler and shield loses the 2 durability. If you block it, but it's like between 1 to 4, within 1 to 4 of your blocked guarded value, then your buckler and shield loses 1 and your armor loses 1. And then if it's below that, then no loss. Pretty much the same stuff applies for that. For weapons, it's a little bit different. So melee weapons lose durability. So melee weapons, so Thordain, this doesn't necessarily apply to your bow stuff. But melee weapons lose durability in different means to ranged weapons. Regardless of whether the ranged weapon hits or misses, it always loses 1 durability. So that's the ranged weapon, due to normal usage. For melee weapons, if a PC makes a weapon attack against a target and the hit roll falls 5 or more below the defense value and resilience value of the target, the melee weapon loses -2 durability, hitting the armor in an awkward fashion and causing damage to the weapon. If the PC's melee weapon attack still does not land an attack but is only 1 to 4 points below the target's DV or RV, the weapon only loses -1 durability. If the weapon hits, it hits cleanly. Yeah. And basically, it's the same thing if it drops to 0 and you still attack with it, you still wish to attack with it, and they block it, they make a Fortitude survival check with a DC based on the rarity for your weapon, and if they succeed, your weapon breaks. For ranged weapons, if an attack brings the ranged weapon down to 0 points of durability, the PC must make an agility survival check instead of a Fortitude. And it's the PC doing that, not an enemy, to determine how careful they are with handling their fragile weapon, with a DC based on the rarity of the weapon. If the PC succeeds on the check, the weapon stays in the fragile state and the DC is reduced by 1. So yeah. If the adventurer, and then the same thing with guard. If the adventurer uses a 2-handed weapon to guard against a weapon attack, the same rules apply for buckler and shield durability. However, if the weapon is in the fragile state, it cannot be used to guard. So that's just kind of a caveat. On the next page, you guys just have armor values, physical weapon values, and elemental weapon values as far as damage, cost, that kind of stuff. And then, yeah, you guys can kind of read to see what footgear, headgear, and barding, and that kind of stuff does. Mounted combat, though, I do want to talk about this before heading out. So during combat, you may choose to fight atop a valiant steed. While this is an option for all adventurers, it is important to note the following requirements. You can ride a steed that is your size or larger. 2 of the same size creature can ride a steed 1 size larger. In order to properly break a mount, the player must attempt to soothe the beast before mounting by succeeding in a contested charisma survival check with the beast. If the rider fails, they cannot attempt to break the beast again for another 6 hours, and the beast gains +1 to their next roll for each time they succeed, essentially. Once broken, captured mounts can be ridden, but they will move and attack on their own initiative count, controlled by me, the Fate Weaver. That is until they are properly trained during the holiday. So during a holiday phase, you can use an action to attempt to break a mount, basically. So once a mount is successful...
So a little bit of spoiler.
Yes.
I was just going to say, a little bit of spoilers. So with Yukio, he is already broken in at this point?
Yeah. You basically spent your holiday action doing that.
Okay. So
once a mount is successfully broken, the beast moves and follows the commands of its rider. While mounted, keep the following in mind. It takes a turn action to mount and unmount your steed. I think in D&D the rule's half of your movement or something, but in this one it takes a turn action to mount and dismount. If your steed has an attack action, it can perform the attack action at any point during your turn. Opponents can attack either you or your steed regardless of your steed's enmity. While mounted, you gain +1 to enmity rolls at the top of each round. So that's an additional modifier to your enmity roll. Your bigger target, obviously more threatening, riding atop something. So you get a +1. And then if your mount falls unconscious, dies, or is knocked over during the course of combat, the player may use a reflex support action to attempt a DC 8 agility survival check on a success landing firmly on their feet or falling prone on a failed check. So that's kind of how combat works. I think that's most of the different types of things that combat is. So as you can see, it's relatively similar as far as the progression goes to Everlast, but there's a few more things that you have to keep track of, and there are things that the changes that I made and like the are primarily used for party dynamic, which is why I say when you are creating a like a character or like you're starting a game, it's good to have like 4 characters. I mean, at a minimum 3 player characters, so at least each role can be filled, so you guys can have well-rounded battles. Because if you don't have someone to really take on enmity, it's pretty much a free-for-all on whoever gets attacked. If you guys don't have a supporter, you're gonna have limited abilities to be able to heal. If you don't have an attacker, it might take longer to be able to slay things, like that kind of stuff. So having a well-rounded party is very valuable to playing this game as far as the combat goes. And another thing to notice, for example, in D&D, you can go up to level 20. In my game, you can go up to level 10. You can still continue to gain things such as ascension points, which are tied to the experience that you gain after combat. And by using those, you can buy certain traits, arts, bonuses to stats, increase your mana or stamina, that kind of stuff. So you can spend it to use that. But I don't want this game to have players become like gods. I know D&D, that's kind of the point, is like you kind of get to godhood and then you pretty much, but my issue with that is the game starts to become run by the players as opposed to the storyteller, such as the DM. So in Everlast, the way that it works is players go up to level 10, so their HP and like their HP gain stops at that point. And so like there's only a certain amount that they can get as heroes of growth that they can have. But they can still gain things like new skills to continue playing, especially if you hit level 10 and your adventure continues to go on. That's one thing I just wanted to note. The point of this game isn't to pretty much like take over the world and become gods. You're chosen by Alomnia through patronage by the Serac to be able to fight back the evils of the world. So one character is not going to be able to take on like the worst evils of the void. It's going to take teamwork and a party to do so. Like I said, the values that this game is made in is for entertainment and for fun, but it's supposed to, in a way, I guess, help you grow as a person outside of the real world while you are like learning like different types of like team working skills, learning hopefully good messages inside the game as well. That's kind of the point of Everlast. I feel like that's something, and kind of one of my inspirations for creating it. I feel like that's not something that really exists, and that's why with Dane with Fantasy Forge, I really love kind of what he has going with Fantasy Forge Studios, a place for really good, family-friendly, good content to be able, a platform to be able to have that. And I feel like Everlast, I want to be able to do that. So speaking of which, guys, players, do your best during these things not to use excessive swearing or things like that. Again, like people of any age can be viewing and watching this stream as far as that goes. I know we're going a little bit over, guys, but I just wanted to let you guys know just pretty much everything that this game has going for it, and hopefully everybody is excited for this. So Dane, why don't you go over and talk about kind of streaming schedules going forward?
Yeah, so as far as Everlast goes, it's going to be very consistent. So we're putting together a streaming schedule. The plan for now is every second and third Saturday of every month. Though there are some exceptions. For example, I know on the 17th of April, which happens to be the third which happens to be the third Saturday
Or Sunday.
of April. Did I say Sunday? Sorry. The 17th is a Sunday. The 16th, the day before, that happens to be Easter. And I know there's going to be a bunch of guys who are unable to make that stream. So obviously schedule depending. The goal is every second and third Saturday of the month. And we can postpone stuff. We'll get together with the guys. But as a general time frame, second and third Saturday of every month.
And we're always going to be
Saturday being.
We're always going to be streaming at the same time too. And so Dane and I are both here in Japan. So one thing about me, I know you guys, those of you who have been following Fantasy Forge for a while, I'm finally moved over to Japan. Dane's been living in Japan for years at this point, but I'm finally here with my wife, able to be here. But Dane and I are in Japan time. So currently right now, what time is it? Almost 3 a.m. in the morning.
3 a.m.
And so we're doing this at the time that we are because it's a time that works for all of our buddies in Colorado. Saturday morning. So yes, the Sunday is Easter, and I know Saturday is not Easter, but for us it's Sunday, and we, for example, like going like to church the next day and doing that kind of stuff. That's really important for us. So at 3 a.m. it makes it very difficult to focus in the mornings, especially for really special days like Easter. So, oh, and thanks for the congrats on the move. I appreciate that.
Yeah, but the plan for now is every second and third Saturday. Same time, 8:30 a.m., starting at 8:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So I don't know what time that is necessarily for everyone, depending on where you are in the world right now. I know for Colorado time, that's 9:30 a.m. And then obviously when daylight savings comes, it'll continue to match the daylight savings time. So it'll only change for people who aren't part of the daylight savings time. So yeah, that's the goal. And then the fourth Saturday, most likely going to be pre-recorded, a podcast. So again, if you guys have any questions about characters, about backstory, about any of that kind of stuff, feel free again to send questions in the Discord, on Facebook, or in the or on Twitter. So we do have pages for each and every one of those, and we'll be able to answer each of those questions. But again, that podcast, which again is the fourth Saturday of the month, is to go over the events that took place during the previous two sessions that happened and answer any questions. Again, this is a brand new game, so we want to try to get you guys to know as much as you possibly can about this world, about each of the characters, and I mean, hopefully we can develop relationships that are more than just characters with each other. Hopefully, again, they can feel real to each and every one of you and give you very real emotions. So that's the goal for that.
These streams are going to be running for 2 hours from when they start, and hopefully Thordane, yes, will be on all the future streams. That would be great. But yeah, these streams are going to run for 2 hours. We're going to try to keep it strict because everybody has lives, and again, it's almost 3 a.m. And so, like where Dane and I are. And so we're going to try to keep it strict to that. This session was a little bit more because we had to get through all of the shenanigans as far as the rules. And this is introducing all the players to the new game as well. And so I do want to thank all of you who have stuck around with us through this crazy long session 0. Oh my gosh. Congrats to you guys. That's very impressive because I know it was a lot. And it was just like a lot of not only lore dump, but just game mechanics. And like, I mean, maybe it's interesting to some of you guys, but you guys are awesome for staying through and with it. The going forward, it's actually going to be story and following the adventures of Eclaas Eeas as they continue to make their way through the world of Everlast, defeating the denizens of the void. So thank you all for any last words from anybody?
Well, starting the 10th, we will have our next stream. I know some of the guys in the party won't be able to make it. If that's the case, we will have a one-off. We do have one event that is happening. And if that's the case, then we'll have the one-off, which is totally fine for the guys who can make it and can join. And we'll do our best this is for all of you guys as well. The fourth Saturday of April, we will have our second session. And then week 1 of May will be the what's it called? the podcast, and then the full schedule is going to get going in May. So the second and third weekend from there on, we're going to continue doing so.
And
that's
also,
the plan for now.
Big thanks to everyone, though. Everyone who's been a part
Yes.
of this whole process. Kami for doing all of the advertisements and everything for us. As you can see, this map, this isn't the final version of the map. This is the map that we've been using for the past couple of years. Things like Incarnate, this music that you hear in the background, specifically this song, is tavern music from Sirenscape. Thank you to all the people from Sirenscape that do all their stuff. The beginning screens, and we actually have a battle theme that we have currently made. These are actually owned by us, but the artist is named Powell. He is an amazing dude, and he makes really epic soundtracks. And so go check him out too. He does awesome stuff. But we do own these things. And again, as far as copyright stuff, please do what you can to help us protect what we do. We're very, well, especially myself, but we're very happy with what we've created. And going forward, we really want to, just have this be fun for everyone and not have no one ruin it with trying to steal information and like that kind of stuff. This is for entertainment and honestly for the creation of this game to be able to eventually get out to the public. It's in good hands with Fantasy Forge Studios, so please don't try anything crazy. But again, thank you for all for being here. You guys are absolutely amazing. This community is great. I've been lurking in the shadows for most of Dane's streams, and so I've been there whether you know it or not. But it is a pleasure to be able to be with each and every one of you. All of our players, Max, Cole, Dane, Jonathan, and Connor, you guys are all amazing. Hopefully you guys can continue to be here as your guys' players make their way through Everlast. It's really exciting.
Yeah. Just one last thing before we do end up going. One more time, we do have. This is a game that is being created right now. So the content of the game itself has been created, but we are still currently in the process of getting this made into a game made for the public. So part of the reason we are streaming it is, again, to share this wonderful story with the world, but also as a way to be able to get people hyped and super excited for it. And one way to be able to do that is joining the stream, of course, and hanging out with us and having fun and becoming an expert and seeing a game that is in its early creation stages. And hey, one day you could be an old person and saying, I remember when Fantasy Forged came out with that game. Oh, what is it called? Everlast. What a wonderful time that was. You'll be able to do have a little bit of bragging rights for that. But those of you who are able to give monetarily, again, we will have a Patreon coming up. You'll be able to use that Patreon to benefit us as players inside this game. But also, merch is a great way to be able to support. We do have a merch store. So if you go on the Twitch page to the About section, we have character merchandise specifically for each character. Again, Thordane's the only one not up in the store yet. He will be up shortly, hopefully this week. But you can be able to support the characters that you like by buying some merch. We have stickers, we have t-shirts, we have magnets, we have keychains, we have all kinds of stuff to be able to support your favorite character, as well as just general Everlast logo stuff.
Well, and general Fantasy Forge merch too.
Yeah, you got stuff for there because again, I do stream personally on this channel as well, and we're hoping to add multiple other personalities to this channel as well in the future. So again, we are a studio. We're not just me, Fantasy Forge. We're Fantasy Forge Studios, of course. So feel free to support that way. All proceeds from the Everlast merch go back into the creation of the game. So they'll be going towards artworks. They'll be going towards publishing costs. They'll be going into all that stuff. So any money, anything that is spent on this channel, is going to be going back into the game, and you're going to be supporting us doing that. Of course, we will never ask you for money. You being here and enjoying the adventure with us is more than enough. But if you are able to give, we have multiple ways to be able to do so, and we will let you know once we get that Patreon up. Feel free to join the Discord. If you haven't joined the Discord, we do have a website. Again, that is linked in the About section below. The big heart-shaped dude down there. You can click that and feel free to get to our website. We're going to have a major website update here, hopefully within the next week, and you can follow along for that. And again, we do have social medias. We're working on an Instagram right now. Most likely, it's just going to be my personal Instagram. for the time being that we're going to be able to work with. But yeah, if you do see an ad, it will always help us to share it. We will be uploading each of these episodes to YouTube and Spotify. So for those of you who aren't as much into the video version of this, you can upload it on Spotify, and we're working on that. And you can also check it out on YouTube. So if you do happen to miss a stream, no problem. That's where they're going to be uploaded. And again, any support we can helps, any likes, any shares, any of that kind of stuff to get the word out about Everlast is highly appreciated. So I think that's all that I have. Anyone else? Cole, Max, John, Kyle, any other things?
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, it was really fun. Really, really fun.
All right. Awesome. I think we'll go ahead and stop for the night. But as always, we look forward to seeing you guys next stream. And we'll see where Eclaas Eeas goes from here. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.